My name is Emma Palmer, and I'm 33 years old. People say distance softens family chaos, that if you run far enough, the shouting turns into background noise and the expectations fade into fog. Seattle was supposed to be that fog for me, a place where I could build something of my own, breathe without comparison, and live a life that didn't orbit around my brother's achievements. But sometimes distance doesn't protect you. Sometimes it blinds you until the knife is already in your back. I was halfway through my morning latte in my tiny Capitol Hill apartment when my lawyer, Douglas, said the words that cracked something deep inside me. Emma, the beachfront condo your grandmother left you, it's gone. Sold. Signed. Stolen. I didn't speak. I didn't scream. I simply stood at my rain-streaked window, watching droplets chase each other down the glass, like they already knew what I was about to do next. Because if my brother thought I would stay quiet 3,000 miles away, he never understood who I became after I left Miami. Growing up, Keith was the sun in our house, golden, warm, untouchable. Dad adored him so loudly it shook the walls. Every Thanksgiving photo framed Keith in the center. Every family update began with, "Your brother's doing great, Emma. Why can't you be more like him?" And I was the shadow, the girl who chose design school instead of law, the daughter who asked too many questions, the disappointment who moved across the country to find herself. But Grandma Sylvia and she never saw me that way. Her condo overlooking Biscayne Bay wasn't just property. It was warmth wrapped in jasmine perfume. It was blueberry scones cooling on her kitchen counter. It was the safe place she built after Grandpa passed, a refuge she shared only with me. "Don't let anyone dim your light, Emma," she'd whisper, cupping my hands in hers. "You're meant to shine exactly as you are." The deed she left me wasn't only an inheritance, it was love on paper. So when Douglas said it was gone, something inside me went hollow. "Emma," Douglas continued, his voice taut, "the documents were off. The notary seals are irregular, and the signature—" I turned away from the window. "What about it?" He hesitated. "It looks practiced." A cold current slid beneath my ribs. "Practiced," I repeated. "Meaning forged, meaning Keith." I sank into my desk chair, staring at the blurred reflection of my face on my laptop screen. Outside, the rain intensified. Harsh, relentless, like the sky was grieving before I could. Douglas sighed. "Foolish boy. Whoever thought they could get away with this?" The words weren't meant for me, but they struck like a match against dry bone. Foolish boy. Keith always believed I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't fight back, that Seattle made me soft. He had no idea what silence can become when it's finally pushed too far. I opened an old email folder and found the scanned copy of Grandma's handwritten will. My throat tightened at the sight of her elegant script, curved, gentle, unmistakably hers. Then I pulled up the new signature used on the sale. The loops were too sharp, the pressure uneven. Keith always pressed too hard when he wrote, like he needed every mark to leave an impression. My chest burned, a mix of heartbreak and fury. He hadn't just stolen a condo, he'd stolen her memory, her trust. "Emma," Douglas said softly, "don't confront him yet. We need proof, real proof. I'll handle the records. You stay quiet." Quiet. My whole childhood had been quiet. Quiet while Keith bragged. Quiet while Dad dismissed me. Quiet while every comparison chipped away at me bit by bit. But this silence felt different. Sharp. Controlled. Dangerous. "Just find out how deep it goes," I whispered. We hung up. The apartment went still. Even the refrigerator hum felt distant, muted under the weight settling on my chest. I opened a new folder on my laptop and labeled it in capital letters, Truth. Then I began digging. 6 hours passed in a blur of files, email archives, old letters, birthday cards, photographs of Grandma's handwriting, anything that could prove what my gut already knew. Every curve, every flourish, every tiny imperfection in her script. I memorized them like a survivor memorizes the geography of a battlefield. By 2 a.m., my desk was buried in printouts and cold coffee. I stitched together digital comparisons, circled discrepancies, annotated each mismatch. And finally, I emailed everything to Douglas with a single line. He thought I wouldn't notice. He was wrong. My phone buzzed instantly. But it wasn't Douglas. "Unknown number. You're asking dangerous questions." The words glowed on my screen like a threat carved in ice. My heart lurched. Who was this? Keith? Someone he hired? Someone involved? I typed back with trembling fingers. "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared. Pulsed. Vanished. Nothing. The next morning, my phone vibrated again, this time with a name I recognized. Keith Palmer. For almost 2 minutes, I just watched his name flashing across my screen, my breath shallow, my fingers cold. I should have let it go to voicemail, but curiosity and fury braided together in my chest, and I answered. "Em!" Keith's voice burst through, bright and self-satisfied. "You won't believe the deal I just closed. Grandma's condo. Sold it last Thursday. All cash. 400 grand. Clean transaction." The world narrowed into a pinhole. "You sold it?" I said slowly. "Yep. The buyer loved the bay view. Look, I know you're busy with your studio stuff in Seattle, so I figured I'd handle the heavy lifting. I'll wire you $50,000 next week. Help you out with rent." $50,000. From my $400,000. From what Grandma left me. "Keith," I said, "you do realize that condo was mine?" He laughed, a quick, careless sound. "Come on, Emma. Grandma wanted us to share everything, and honestly, you weren't using it. You forged her signature." Silence, then his voice dropped colder. "Careful, you don't know what you're saying." "Douglas found inconsistencies," I said. "Notary seals that don't exist. Handwriting that doesn't match." Another long pause. Then a forced chuckle. "You're overreacting. That lawyer's milking you for billable hours. Don't embarrass yourself, Emma." And he hung up. I stared at the rain-streaked window, my reflection fractured by silver lines of water. My heartbeat was steady. Too steady. Keith had just admitted everything. Not directly, but enough. Enough to build a weapon out of his arrogance. I pressed play on the recording app I always kept running for work interviews, a habit that suddenly felt like fate. His voice filled the room, confident, careless, damning. Proof. That evening, Dad called. I almost didn't answer. But old guilt has a way of pulling your thumb toward the green button. "Sweetheart," he said warmly. "Keith told me about the condo. Such a relief to have it settled." "Settled?" I repeated. "He's been working nonstop to protect the family asset. You should be grateful." I closed my eyes. "Dad, did he mention who inherited it?" A sigh, long, tired, familiar. "Emma, why create problems? Keith handled everything. Let it go." And just like always, the call ended before I could explain, before I could defend myself, before I could matter. The silence afterward chilled me to the bone. They still thought I was the emotional one, the impractical one, the foolish girl who left Miami to design logos and posters. But I wasn't foolish. Not anymore. I turned back to my laptop, opened the folder labeled Truth, and whispered to the empty room, "Let's begin." For the next 3 days, my life narrowed into two things: evidence and silence, both sharper than any blade my family had ever thrown at me. Seattle's rain became background noise as I turned my apartment into a small-scale investigation office. Papers spread across the floor like a forensic mosaic. Grandma's old birthday cards, letters, envelopes, anything with her handwriting. Sticky notes covered the wall above my desk, linking dates, signatures, days, timestamps. Every loop of her cursive became a breadcrumb, leading me toward the truth. But the truth doesn't set you free. It puts your pulse in a vice. My boyfriend Mark noticed first. He came by after work, hair damp from the drizzle outside, a grocery bag in one hand and concern in the other. "Em, you slept, what, 2 hours?" he asked, stepping around the pile of documents on the floor. "Did a tornado file taxes in here?" I forced a smile. "Just a work project." His eyes softened. "Emma, you don't have to lie to me." That halted me. We'd been together almost a year. Steady, realistic, nothing like the dramatic chaos of my family. Mark wasn't a grand gesture man. He was the type who remembered to buy my favorite tea, who sent me pictures of sunsets he thought I'd like, who noticed when my breath changed before I started crying. And maybe that's why my throat tightened now. "It's Keith," I whispered. His jaw tensed. "What did he do this time?" I told him everything. The condo, the fraud, the forged signature, the threatening text. Mark listened without interrupting, a skill my own family never learned. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. "Emma, this is serious. You need protection, legal and personal." "I have Douglas," I said. "And me," Mark added quietly. There was no romance swell, no cinematic music, just a steady truth settling between us. And yet I still felt the instinctive tug to say, "I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. And for once I didn't pretend. That night, Douglas called again. "I pulled county records," he said, papers shuffling in the background. "Your brother forged not just the signature, he manipulated the notary logs. Whoever helped him wasn't a real notary." "Meaning?" I asked. "Meaning this was premeditated, calculated." My stomach nodded. "Emma," he continued, The buyer's agent already noticed something off in the paperwork. If we file a fraud report now, the county will freeze the sale proceeds immediately. I stared at the glowing window. The rain had softened to a mist, leaving the city shimmering like it was holding its breath. "Do it," I whispered. "Then stay quiet. If Keith panics, he might try to cover his tracks." "Too late for that," I said. The next morning, I woke to 10 missed calls, then 12, then 17. All from Keith. By the 20th call, curiosity outweighed caution. I answered. "What did you do?" he shouted, his voice cracking on the last word. I didn't even flinch. "Good morning to you too," I said calmly. "Don't play dumb, Emma. The bank froze my accounts. I can't access anything. My attorney's calling me nonstop. What did you tell them?" "You forged Grandma's documents." "I did not." "You forged her signature," I said, cutting him off. Douglas verified everything. The county confirmed the seals were fake. A long, ragged inhale. Then the anger. "You think you can destroy me? You think you're smarter than me? You're delusional." I let the silence stretch until it became its own kind of weapon. Finally, I spoke. "You stole what Grandma left me, Keith. You stole from me. You stole her memory. That's on you, not me." "Emma, listen," he said, suddenly softer. "I did this for the family. You live across the country chasing creative hobbies. I manage real assets. You wouldn't have known what to do with that property." Something inside me twisted sharply. Creative hobbies, not a career, not a life I built with my own hands. Just a hobby. "Goodbye, Keith," I said. And this time I hung up. Proof number 2, his panic. Proof number 3, his arrogance. Proof number 4 was waiting. 2 hours later, Dad called. "Emma," he said disapprovingly, "your brother is devastated. He says you filed fraud charges. Tell me that's not true." "It is." "Why would you do this? Keith handled the sale responsibly. You're overreacting." Overreacting. A word he'd carved into my childhood. "Dad," I said quietly, "Grandma left the condo to me alone." "That's not what Keith told me." "Because Keith lied." "Oh, Emma," Dad sighed, "you always get so emotional." Mark, who was sitting at my table, froze when he heard the voice through the speaker. I straightened. "This isn't emotion," I said. "It's evidence. Keith's handwriting doesn't match Grandma's. The seals aren't real, and I have a recording." "You recorded your brother?" "Yes." "Emma, I don't know what happened to you. You used to be so kind." I felt something inside me snap, not loudly, but finally. "Being kind doesn't mean being blind," I said. "And I won't be silent just because it keeps you comfortable." Dad hung up. Mark stared at me, stunned. "Emma, I'm proud of you." But pride wasn't what settled in my chest. It was grief, heavy, ancient, inevitable. That night, a number I didn't recognize flashed on my phone. For a moment, fear prickled across my skin. But when I answered, it wasn't a threat. "Emma?" a familiar voice said. "It's Brandon Pierce. Keith's best friend since college." My pulse quickened. "Brandon?" "I need to tell you something," he said quietly, "and I don't want your brother to know I called." I stood still. Even the rain seemed to hold its breath. "He forged it," Brandon said. "All of it. The will, the notary, the signatures. He told me you'd never notice from Seattle." My knees nearly buckled. Brandon continued, voice trembling with guilt. "When the accounts froze, I started digging. He broke down yesterday, said he deserved the condo more because he worked harder, and you were, his words, too soft to handle a property that big." Soft. There it was again. The story they'd written for me before I learned to write my own. Brandon exhaled shakily. "He already spent some of the money on a Tesla. I'm sorry, Emma. If this goes to court, I'll testify." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Thank you," I whispered. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You were right." He hung up. I stood in the dark, staring out at the glistening city, heartbreaking and hardening at the same time. Maybe silence had been my armor once. But now it was becoming something else, a blade. After Brandon's call, I sat alone for almost an hour without moving. Seattle glittered outside my window. Wet sidewalks, blurry headlights, the hum of quiet lives going on as mine split down the center. Keith had always been reckless, but this wasn't recklessness. This was entitlement sharpened into weaponry. By morning, Douglas called, with the tone of someone bracing for impact. "Emma, the fraud report is officially filed. County investigators froze the sale proceeds at 9:12 a.m. The buyers have been notified. We're initiating discovery. Buckle up." I pressed a hand to my forehead. "Okay. Stay off social media. Don't answer unknown calls. Don't confront your brother directly. At this point, he's a cornered animal." I glanced at the 27 missed calls from Keith littering my screen. "I think the cornering already started." Douglas hummed thoughtfully. "Good. Let him sweat. I wasn't sure if he was saying it to reassure me or himself. That afternoon, Mark stopped by after work with takeout and a look that said he expected to find me in pieces. Instead, he found me printing legal PDFs with eerie calm. He leaned against the counter. "Are you okay?" "No," I admitted, "but I'm functioning." Mark watched me for a long moment. "Can I ask something? Why did your dad react like you'd set the house on fire?" It was a fair question, a painful one. Keith was always their safe bet, I said. The star, the stable one. I was the messy one, too sensitive, too artistic, too everything. "That doesn't justify them dismissing you." "No," I whispered, "but it taught me something." "What's that?" "That quiet people don't get heard until they make noise." Mark stepped forward, brushing his thumb over my cheek. "Then make all the noise you need, Em. I'm here." I leaned into his touch, not because I needed rescuing, but because being believed was a rare and unfamiliar kindness. Keith's first voicemail arrived that evening. His voice was frantic. "Emma, call me back. We need to fix this. You don't understand what you've done." His second voicemail came minutes later, angrier. "You think you're so smart? You think a designer can outmaneuver me? You're making a huge mistake." The third shook with something closer to fear. "Dad is upset. Mom's crying. If you don't drop this..." He didn't finish the sentence. Part of me wanted to throw my phone across the room. Another part wanted to archive his messages like evidence of who he'd always been. Instead, I hit save. 2 days later, Dad called again. "Emma," he said without greeting. His voice was clipped and weary. "Your brother's attorney contacted me. They're saying you filed criminal charges. Is that true?" "Yes." "Why?" That one word held accusation, disappointment, exhaustion. Every flavor of dismissal I'd swallowed since childhood. "Because he forged documents," I said plainly. "He stole from me." Dad sighed heavily. Keith admitted the process wasn't perfect. "Not perfect," my voice cracked. "Dad, he committed fraud. He stole the property Grandma left me. He lied to you and to me." "You should have talked to us first." I laughed softly. "Like you would have listened?" A pause stretched between us. "Emma, you always take things so personally." "I always tell the truth," I corrected, "and nobody hears it unless it inconveniences Keith." Dad hesitated, then said the sentence that had haunted me for years. "You used to be kinder." The words hit like cold water. "I'm still kind," I said quietly. "I'm just no longer silent." He hung up. I stared at my phone, breath shallow, chest tight. It was painful, how familiar that wound was, how easily he reopened it without realizing. Or maybe he did realize. Maybe that was the worst part. The following morning, Douglas texted, "Call me ASAP, urgent." My stomach dropped. When I answered, he didn't waste time. "We have movement." "Good or bad?" "Depends on your definition." Keith's attorney reached out. They're requesting a preliminary meeting. No trial, no escalation. "So, they want to settle?" "Looks like it." My pulse steadied. "They're scared." "As they should be," Douglas said. "Our evidence is airtight. The buyers discovered mismatched notarization logs. Brandon Pierce confirmed the forgery. The recording of Keith bragging is, frankly, devastating." I sank into my desk chair. "What are they offering?" There was a rustle of papers on his end. $200,000 in exchange for dropping the charges. I laughed. It wasn't a pretty sound. It was hollow, sharp. "He stole $400,000, I said. "He wants to buy forgiveness at a discount?" "Settlements are always lower," Douglas said carefully. "If you push to trial, they'll claim Grandma lacked mental clarity when she signed the will." I went still. She was perfectly lucid. "I know, but lawyers twist narratives. Juries get swayed. It's a gamble." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I felt 10 years old again, being told I was overreacting in the hallway while Keith got a pass for everything. "Emma," Douglas said softly, "you don't have to decide right now." But I already knew. "I'm not accepting." "Okay," he said, "then we'll counter with terms." "What kind?" "The kind that hurt." That night, sleep refused to come. I stayed up reading the last email Grandma ever sent me, her words glowing like tiny lanterns in the dark. "If I ever leave you something, no, it's not charity. It's a promise. A promise that you'll live boldly, Emma. Not quietly, not halfway. Boldly." Tears gathered in my eyes, but they didn't fall. Boldly. The next morning, I met Douglas in his office. Rain streaked the window behind him, the gray sky casting everything in somber clarity. "Your terms?" he asked. I inhaled. "4 of them." He clicked his pen. "1," I said. "Keith writes a notarized confession admitting every detail." Douglas raised his brows. "Savage, continue." 2, he reimburses the buyers in full from his personal funds. Reasonable. 3, he writes a letter to my father explaining exactly what he did. In detail. No excuses. Douglas smiled faintly. Brutal. And 4, I finished. Keith signs a legally binding statement agreeing to never contest an inheritance again. Ever. Douglas tapped his pen against his notepad. Poetic, strategic, and beautifully punishing. He picked up the phone. I'll deliver the terms myself. As he spoke to opposing counsel, I stared out at the rain-soaked city. For the first time since this began, I felt something shift inside me. Not victory, not relief. Something quieter, something clearer. The truth wasn't just bleeding anymore. It was beginning to heal. Douglas called at 6:42 p.m., his voice threaded with a tension that made my pulse stutter. He agreed, he said. I blinked. Keith agreed? To everything? All 4 terms. No changes, no negotiations. The air in my apartment shifted, still, heavy, electric. His lawyer said he just wants this over, Douglas continued. Frankly, he sounded like a man who finally realized the ground is gone beneath him. I lowered myself into the nearest chair, clutching the phone. Send me the documents. You sure you're ready to see them tonight? Yes, I said. I need to. 30 minutes later, the email arrived. A PDF attachment waited like a beating heart beneath the subject line. Signed confession, plus legally binding agreements. Keith Palmer. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. The first page appeared, black text sharp against white. I, Keith Palmer, acknowledge that I falsified legal documents related to the estate of Sylvia Palmer, including but not limited to forged signatures, altered notary seals, and misrepresentation of inheritance terms. His handwriting signature sat at the bottom, small, defeated, shaky. For a long moment, I just stared. This wasn't triumph, it wasn't vengeance, it wasn't even satisfaction. It was grief dressed as justice. Mark arrived a few minutes later. When he walked in, he found me sitting on the floor, the confession open on my laptop, rain pressing like fingertips against the windows. He crouched beside me. What happened? He signed, my voice cracked. Everything. Mark exhaled slowly, then wrapped an arm around me, not to fix anything, not to fill the silence, but simply to sit with me in it. Because victory isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet after the storm when you realize the wreckage will take years to clean up. The next morning, Douglas called again. Ready for the next steps? I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Tell me. First, we'll forward the confession to the county for official closure of the fraud case. Second, once Keith reimburses the buyers, they'll withdraw their complaint. Third, his letter to your father. Wait, I said, he already wrote it? Douglas made a small, doubtful noise. If you can call it that, it's a piece of work. He takes responsibility, but you can tell he wrote it with tears in his coffee. Forward it. 5 minutes later, I opened the file. Keith's message to Dad. Dad, I lied. I falsified the documents. I took the condo. I forged the signatures. I told Emma she was imagining things. I told you she was emotional, unreasonable. None of it was true. She was right. I was wrong. I owe her everything I took. I'm sorry. Keith. I reread it 3 times. Not because I wanted to savor the apology. I didn't. But because I finally understood something. He wasn't apologizing for hurting me. He was apologizing for being caught. I closed the file. Mark stepped out from the kitchen, 2 mugs of tea in hand. How bad is it? It's not bad, I said quietly. It's empty. He sat beside me on the couch, handing me a mug. Empty can still be closure. I nodded. Maybe. 2 days later, everything shifted. Douglas called again, a rare sharpness in his tone. It's official, he said. The property is legally back in your name. Funds unfrozen. Buyers reimbursed. We're done. The words didn't sink in right away. I stood at my window, watching a faint sun break through the clouds over Seattle. The sky glowed pale gold. The city breathed. The storm had finally passed. Emma, Douglas added gently, you did it. I didn't answer. Instead, I slipped on my shoes and walked down to the street, letting the breeze carry the remnants of something, anger, sorrow, childhood ache, away from me. A week later, I listed the condo for sale. People assumed I'd keep it as an emotional monument, a shrine to my grandmother. But Grandma Sylvia never raised me to cling. She raised me to move. My home is where I keep growing, she used to say, not where I stop. Selling that condo wasn't letting her go. It was honoring her. When the payment cleared, $415,000, I stared at the number on my screen until the digits blurred into water. It wasn't the money that made my throat tighten. It was the meaning, validation, belief, freedom. With trembling hands, I registered my design studio. Sylvia Creative. 1 desk, 1 laptop, 1 dream. Mine. 3 weeks later, a package arrived. From Miami, Dad's handwriting on the label. My heart thudded. Inside, wrapped in soft blue tissue paper, was Grandma's jade bracelet, the one she used to wear every Sunday morning while humming to herself in the kitchen. A folded note slipped out. She would want you to have this. Dad. My breath hitched. No apology, no acknowledgement of being wrong. Just a gesture, a small, fragile bridge stretched over years of silence and imbalance. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist. It felt cool against my skin at first, then warm, almost alive. Mark looked up from assembling my new studio shelf. It suits you. I smiled softly. It belonged to someone who made me feel seen. Well, he said, walking over and brushing a curl from my cheek, now it belongs to someone who deserves to be. His words settled in my chest like light. As for Keith, he moved back near our parents, sold the Tesla at a massive loss, started therapy, according to Brandon. I didn't hate him. Hate is a chain that ties you to the person who hurt you, and I was tired of chains. I hoped he learned something about integrity, about humility, about consequences. But his growth wasn't my responsibility. It never had been. One morning, sunlight spilled across my new studio desk, catching the jade bracelet like a jewel. The room smelled faintly of fresh paint and possibility. I swiveled my chair toward the window, watching the city pulse below. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking back. I rested my hand over the bracelet and whispered, "I made it, Grandma." Outside, Seattle buzzed with new beginnings. Inside, I felt weightless, whole, alive. The first morning in my new studio felt like stepping into someone else's life. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, brushing every surface with a soft gold that made the freshly painted walls glow. Outside, Seattle hummed with its usual rhythm. Buses sighing at stops, distant chatter from the cafe below, a dog barking somewhere down the block. But inside, everything was still in a way that didn't feel empty, still in a way that felt earned. I sat at my desk, and ran my thumb over the jade bracelet circling my wrist. It warmed, the stone reflecting the soft light like it was waking up with me. For the first time in months, maybe years, my breath didn't feel heavy. I was lighter now, not because the storm was gone, but because I'd finally walked through it. The settlement funds had landed 2 days earlier. Clean, complete, undisputed. $415,000 transferred into my account with a single click, but it wasn't the number that made my throat tighten. It was what the money represented. Not victory, not revenge, not even justice. It represented belief. Grandma's belief in me, written in ink, sealed in a will, fought for through fire. And now I was building something in her honor. Sylvia Creative had begun with one lonely table and a secondhand lamp, but in the weeks since the paperwork finalized, I'd added more. Color swatches pinned to a mood board, stacks of client sketches, blueprint drafts for a cafe rebrand downtown, a metallic pen holder that Mark insisted looks like something CEOs use. And maybe that was the point. Maybe I was finally becoming someone who didn't survive on scraps of validation. Someone who created without asking permission first. Dad's package still sat on the corner of my desk, the blue tissue paper folded neatly inside. The note tucked beneath the bracelet had been short. 4 understated words. She would want you to have this. No apology. No, I'm sorry I didn't believe you. No acknowledgement of the grief he helped carve into me. But I didn't need those things anymore. People say closure comes when someone finally apologizes. But sometimes closure arrives in quieter ways, when you stop needing the apology at all. I wasn't a daughter waiting to be proven worthy anymore. I was a woman building her own life. Later that afternoon, I heard a soft knock on the studio door. Mark stepped in, holding 2 paper cups of tea and a cardboard box under his arm. "What's this?" I asked, taking 1 cup. He set the box on my desk. "Office warming gift." "You already got me the pen holder." "I know," he said, "but this one's better." I opened the box. Inside was a small, framed photo, me and Grandma Sylvia on her balcony in Miami. The sunset behind us was all warm oranges, just like I remembered. Sylvia's arm wrapped around my shoulders, my head tilted toward hers, laughing at something she'd said. My eyes stung instantly. Where did you get this?" "You sent me a digital copy months ago," Mark said softly. "I had it printed." I traced the edge of the frame with shaking fingers. "Mark, thank you." He brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. "You fought so hard to honor her. She should have a place here too." I leaned into him, resting my forehead briefly against his chest, feeling the steady beat beneath. With him, nothing felt dramatic or forced. Just real, just safe. When he left for an afternoon meeting, I stared at the photo again, my mind drifting back to the last days before Grandma passed. Her kitchen had smelled like lavender soap and vanilla sugar. She used to stand at the stove humming, her jade bracelet clicking gently against the spoon when she stirred batter. "People will underestimate you, my Emma," she told me once. "Not because you fail, because you dare to be different." Back then, I didn't understand. Now I lived it. Sometimes the people you love most are the ones who misjudge you the hardest. Sometimes blood means nothing but shared history. Sometimes the strongest family is the one you choose. And sometimes justice is simply choosing yourself after years of being told not to. 2 weeks passed before I heard from Dad again. The call came late, nearly 10 p.m., the kind of hour where good news almost never arrives. I hesitated before answering, but something told me this time would be different. "Emma," Dad said, voice quieter than I'd heard in months. "Yes?" "I received Keith's letter." I stayed silent. It wasn't easy to read. He swallowed audibly. "I thought I knew my son. I thought I understood everything better than I did." Another pause. For once, Dad sounded small. "Emma, I'm sorry." The words were so unexpected that my breath caught. "I should have listened," he continued. "You've always seen things I didn't. I dismissed you. I shouldn't have." I leaned against the window, watching headlights streak across the street below. "It hurt," I said softly, "for years." "I know." His voice cracked. "And I don't expect forgiveness. Not yet. I just needed you to know. I'm proud of you." The child inside me, the one who spent decades twisting herself into versions she thought would please him, felt something release like a knot finally loosened. "Thank you," I whispered. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't healing overnight. But it was a beginning. Sometimes beginnings are quieter than endings. A month later, I launched Sylvia Creative officially. My first clients came from word-of-mouth recommendations. My website traffic spiked. A cafe downtown booked me to redesign their entire brand identity. A boutique hotel owner reached out for a pitch meeting. My life, once defined by being overshadowed, was finally casting its own light. And every morning, as I locked the studio door behind me, I'd catch a glimmer of green at my wrist, the jade bracelet resting against my skin like a promise. A promise from the past, a promise for the future, a promise that I wasn't going backward. Not ever again. On the last day of summer, I visited the waterfront at sunset, the same hour Grandma used to sit by her balcony and watch the horizon melt into gold. I closed my eyes as the breeze moved through my hair, warm and gentle. "I made it, Grandma," I whispered. "I really made it. Not because I won the case, not because Keith fell, not because my name was finally on the deed, but because I learned something she tried to teach me long ago. Silence isn't weakness. Kindness isn't naivety, and belief, especially in yourself, is the most powerful inheritance of all." When I opened my eyes, the city lights shimmered across the water, bright and endless, just like the life waiting ahead.